Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to the second channel geography news video. Today we're going to be talking about Haiti because of course they are going through some very serious things right now. You might have heard that the Prime Minister was forced to resign, but you might not have heard that law and order collapsed in the country. This is something that sounded very dramatic to me. I mean, there's no way it actually collapsed, right? But this is a country that as recently as 1991 went through a full coup d'etat, and that sounds pretty bad, but they also went through one in 2004, which is not to be confused with any of the other coup d'etats they've had since their founding, and obviously this list isn't extensive because it doesn't include 2021 when their president was assassinated in his home by armed men. This is a wild country in terms of how law and orders are followed, and so as to the current prime minister, his running of the country has been happening since 2021. Basically what happened is on a supposedly interim basis, he decided to lead the country until an election, but he has repeatedly postponed those elections, saying security had to be restored first. And so what has happened to him now? Well, in a lot of parliamentary democracies, you can recall the leader at any time. If enough MPs just say, we don't want you as leader anymore, they can hold fresh elections and get a new government. However, in the case of Haiti, something very interesting has happened because instead of doing a process like that, the process is a little less political and a little more, you cannot come back to the country. Mr. Henry is currently stranded in Puerto Rico after being prevented by armed gangs from returning home. That is absolutely wild to be stuck in Puerto Rico and not be allowed anywhere on the island. Even the Dominican refused him access to their half of the island because obviously there are two ways onto an island nation. One is to fly in, and one, if you happen to have a border with another island nation, is to fly into that. He has been refused access to the entire island, and so he cannot govern the island from abroad, and so he has stood down. This is a big problem because the reason there haven't been elections, it sounds a little bit like it's just the traditional despotic leader who's just there like, yeah, actually, I don't like democracy. You don't always win democracy, and you always win not democracy. That is a very common tale from around the region, but in reality, Haiti is a country which has very, very powerful gangs, and basically many Haitians have questioned the unelected governance, and Mr. Henry's resignation has been one of the key demands of the heavily armed gangs that have recently tightened their grip on the capital. These gangs have attacked the main prison to help thousands of inmates escape, as well as targeting police stations, the capital's international airport, and its port. This is why I could not fly into Haiti's airport, and why it's the strongest level recommendation, because it's controlled by gangs, and that is a crazy thing to think about. The main way in and out of your country was not controlled by the country, but instead by gangs, and so Port-au-Prince and the surrounding region is under a month-long state of emergency while curfew has been extended. In other words, Haiti does not rule Haiti anymore, gangs do. If you look into this even more, you can see that it's actually very serious. It's not just like, oh, gangs control things. There is violence and looting all across the country right now, and even more seriously, the state of emergency means that it is very hard for people to do any lawful behavior. And indeed, even though there are nightly curfews and bans and protests, there is little being done to actually stem violence. Haiti is going through a full problem right now, which I think results in a bit of a problem. Okay, so let's talk about this from a step back for a second, which is to say, when you look at the map of the world and you see that it's divided into 196 or 97 countries, but the map isn't truly accurate, right? So it'll say things like, for example, over here you can see there's Cyprus, and then who knows what is to the north of Cyprus. This is controlled by a separate government, but Google Maps and the rest of the world besides Turkey doesn't recognize the government here, and so it's Cyprus's territory that is just being ruled by, a place over there. The same is true for Ukraine and Crimea. This is a rightful, lawful part of Ukraine, but Russia said, we want it back, and so they took it back, and so you have to display it in this weird way to be like, yeah, so Russia controls it, but we don't recognize that Russia controls it, but also it is controlled by Russia. There is this weird world of when the people who are meant to control something are different to the people who actually do. And the same is true if you, to a lesser extent, you can think of the way governments control things as always being control. I mean, do the government really control your house? It is very famous that I live in Berlin. Would the government control my house if I owned it? This is my house over here, by the way. Would the government control my house? not really, they don't have the full control over it, but at the same time, if they ever bring police around my house and say, you are leaving it, we're having this back, they probably have the legal right to do so. And so, the ultimate authority in any land is meant to be the government of that kingdom. And so, interestingly enough, with Haiti, they have reached a point where they are not the ultimate authority in the land anymore. The fact that prisons are not a thing which the, again, this is crazy to me to say, but prisons are not a thing that the government controls. Prisons are a thing that gangs control. Police stations are not a thing that police control. They are a thing that gangs control. The capital's international airport is not a thing where the government sets the terms of who gets to come in and who gets to come out. No. That is all entirely done by gangs, which is, again, it's wild to get to this level of a full airport being controlled by gangs, but this means that there is not a one effective government that controls the state. There are some very powerful people in the country that fully control it instead. And so the interesting thing about this is it means that those people have gone to the power where they're like, yeah, we don't want the prime minister in the country, and so he can't come here. This is against the rule of law. Again, the idea that the government's law should be the law of the land isn't true if the government says, hey, can our prime minister come back to the country because he is the ruler, and then the gangs say, nah, mate, you have to stand down if you ever want to come back here. Absolutely insane. At least from an outside perspective. And so just for to honestly go back a step here, the reason he's in Puerto Rico too can maybe be explained by this GDP per capita map of Latin America and the Caribbean. Puerto Rico is the richest country in the region, and can you guess who is at the very bottom? Sadly, it is Haiti. There is a very brutal cycle that is happening in any country that can't control itself effectively, is that when you look at a country and you say, yeah, there is a full coup d'etat where the armed forces might take over, or where, the armed forces, actually this was a rebel group that took over, or random armed men just shooting the president. When you have no idea who is in control of the space, and those people might randomly decide that the things that you built are theirs now, because at least with the government, there's an appeals process. When they take my home from me, then I can go to court and I can say you shouldn't have done that. And if the court rules that they shouldn't, they do have to give it back. In Haiti, if an armed gang takes your house or your police station or your prison, your recourse is a little bit harder. If you don't have a lawful body, if you don't have a decent response, then it's very, very hard to make investments into a country, and that begets a level of poverty. And when there is poverty, it is a common link that, at the very least, wealth inequality, but usually wealth inequality and poverty are both linked to crime levels, and so that means that there's going to be a lot more crime, which makes it harder for control to be exerted, which makes it harder for investment, and it's an absolutely brutal cycle that is happening in Haiti and has been happening there for a very long time. And so I guess we can talk about the mild positives, I guess you could say, and the weird geography of the country just for a second, because fun fact, if you do want to go to, visiting Haiti, I had to do it recently, going to the main part, going to the capital city, is absolutely not a good idea. Pro tip, it is incredibly expensive, and the airline will basically say, don't go unless you need to. But as a fun fact, you get a free check bag when you go to Haiti. They're assuming that if you're going back there, you have some very serious needs. And fun fact, I looked that up yesterday. But the other thing that's interesting is that Labadee, this is the part of Haiti which is fully owned by Royal Caribbean. It's so owned by them that when you look at the major tourist attractions, they all have their boats in the picture. This is still receiving ships as normal. So this is the interesting thing to me. And also, if you look at like islands across the rest of the country, the islands that aren't the main Haitian mainland, Hispaniola, I guess everything that isn't Hispaniola, they're doing pretty well actually. You could still go stay at the Abaca Bay Inn Resort or Port Morgan or L'Ansel Beach House. What is that, like something water beach house? Anyway, but you could still stay at these places just fine, which tells you something even more tragic about what's happening here. The parts of the country which are owned, this is almost the reverse problem, but the parts of the country which are owned by international corporations, the parts where, literally hundreds of millions have been spent, they have also got the relevant private security. That is my experience from Haiti, at least. They have the relevant private security to mean, like, yeah, the country's collapsing, like, law and order doesn't exist exist anymore. They're on full PvP. It's like the RuneScape wilderness out in Haiti right now. You better hope you don't find anyone who's too close in level to you. But even though this is happening and there's a very serious set of events that have been going on, honestly, it doesn't affect the private companies who are still able to sell their boats in and out because they now have their own security force. The problem with requiring your own security force for every major commercial operation, though, is it means that, yeah, the rich international companies can shield their stuff, but it is the average people who are suffering, and then they'll go through a whole thing of, it's going to be continuously happening, basically, and I don't know what the way out of that can ever be. It is a country that is stuck in a cycle of the poverty leading to violence and gang stuff, which leads to the only honestly, this leader, I don't want to say he's a great guy. I would be fairly willing to bet that he's not, in fact, but his genuine whether he was right or wrong, he actually was in a situation where he was in a situation where maybe holding elections wasn't safe. If there are gangs that could control the polling stations, then they would just be controlling the government in the end anyway. But also you can see why every citizen in the country says, oh, it's just too unsafe because of gangs and so you can't hold elections. Well, maybe you should do something about the gangs. And again, I feel like any issue that gets sufficiently developed gets near impossible to fix. But what is happening here? I think rather than just lamenting in the problem, I feel like there is a little bit of good news. So basically, they have been doing a meeting. So again, he is not a part of it now that he has left. But Caribbean states from the CARICOM have been working out what should happen. There needs to be a new government. That government needs to actually control the land. And so they're trying to work out what it should be. And so there is an alliance of gangs who are saying that they deserve to be represented in this new government, led by Jimmy Barbecue Chirizia, who went on a rampage when he left, which is, yeah, it's a whole fun thing. Anyway, so long story short is they warned of civil war and genocide. They ignore all of that, but they are actually looking to have talks and maybe have a new body which would be comprised of 2 observers and 7 voting members, including representatives from a number of coalitions, the private sector, civil society, and 1 religious leader. They want to have a country that functions as a country, and so they're going to have some temporary council, which is made up of lots of people who actually can restore order, law and order, and maybe have it so that polling places can be independent, and so they can one day hold elections to actually decide a government. But even then, that is still, I think it is still a requirement that you have a functioning government from that election, because otherwise, in the same way that they thought they solved the problem in 1991 and they thought they solved the problem in 2004, and maybe they thought they solved the problem in 2021, if they don't effectively run a country that the people are going to be happy with, it is going to happen over and over and over again. And isn't there something sad about that? Speaking of something sad, by the way, I want to point out that if you look around Haiti, it's an interesting country, got lots of islands off their mainland. Have you ever noticed there's just a random blue stretch right here? What's in the blue stretch? There's a little bit of a bank there, maybe, but it's one of these interesting things because there are very few of those in the world. In fact, Google Maps is very clear of its colors usually. They change them, but it's like green or like kind of sand colored or like blue. It's like 3-ish colors that rule the map, but every now and then you find an interesting different one. So just for some fun facts at the end here, did you know there's this big bay over here? It's called Guantanamo Bay. It sounds a lot like that place where all those fun things happen, but obviously this is in Cuba, so it can't be, I think Guantanamo Bay is American territory, whereas this is clearly Cuba. So with that said, this is obviously in gray. Who knows why? Is that to represent something, do you think? Probably not. And then also something interesting is you can see these big blue blobs over here. And just for a fun fact to end out the video, this Serenilla Bank is technically territory that can be owned by a country. And so who do you think owns it? So the closest countries are Nicaragua, Honduras, and Jamaica. Which of those 3 countries do you think has a claim? If you guessed the United States, you'd be right. Anyway, with that said, I hope that things get better for Haiti. I would love to talk about it and be like, oh, that country where bad things used to happen. But right now, it is the place where bad things are very much happening. And I think that is absolutely wild on so many levels. Speaking of wild on so many levels, I hope that you enjoyed this video. And I hope that, if you're in Haiti, you have a safe time and you have a nice election soon. And if you're in the rest of the world, I hope that you enjoy this channel in general. If you have you considered, so here's a fun thing YouTube's done recently. They've got this, it's called a media kit that comes with your YouTube channel, where they give you some weird, like, they give you the demographics, things that advertisers want, but they also give you something interesting, which is your audience interests. Apparently, a lot of you are PC gamers and hardcore gamers, as well as light TV viewers. What is light TV? What are you watching there? But also, apparently, your shopping, it tells me your shopping interests on average. There are lots of people here like video editing and production software, motor vehicles, used. You know, I like that you're very frugal people. Real estate, household supplies, and home appliances. Very high. How are you watching? You know, the number of 12-in-1 air fryers I have sold via the link in the description is not matching that at all. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you would consider supporting me on Patreon. I do use the money mostly to fund kebabs. Occasionally, I have to admit, I'm using the money to support this channel, but most of it will go into weird drinks, lobster rolls, and kebabs, and then occasionally just, mostly the good things, though. With that said, hope you all enjoyed this video, because I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. We should just do random Street View all the time. This is fun. Looks like that cloud looks like Antarctica, right? Okay, I've gotta leave. I've got things to do today. Bye. Nah, I don't have things to do. I'll hang out with you today. Wait, did you see that? Let's go back. Do you see? Oh no, is it gone? Is it never coming back? Oh no, it's not. It's never coming back. Okay, sad. Thank you for watching. See you next time from outside my house. Goodbye.